Hi everyone, Janie here. Welcome back to my garden. So we all have areas of our garden that we don't love, whether it's a really small area, maybe it's just one plant that you're not a huge fan of, or maybe it's a huge part of your garden that you're working on, or maybe it's a part of your garden that you kind of just walk past and pretend like it's not there. And that's how I am with this raised garden bed right by my weeping willow tree at the front of my property. When I do my front garden tours, a lot of you ask me why I just quickly skip by this area. And it's because I just am not a huge fan of it. I just really don't like how it looks. It never seems to be blooming well. The bearded iris kind of browns out, like it bloomed a little bit and now it's starting to brown out. And I just haven't planted it up the way that I really like it. So I know it's something that I have to address, but to me, this seems like kind of a big job. But finally, it's been bugging me so much that I decided, okay, I got to get out here and I got to at least start addressing it so I can make a decision on what I'm going to do. So this willow tree garden bed, Jason and I made the decision that we were not going to touch it this year and we were going to address it next year. We're going to put a pathway in. We're going to extend the orchard garden pathway and really focus on this area this year, or next year, which has been really nice because then I've kind of just been able to go like this and not worry about it. But the problem is that I cannot even really decide what I want to do with this area yet because I just try and ignore it. So let me give you all a look at the raised bed around the weeping willow tree. It's kind of falling apart. We had another one that kind of matched this that was over here, but we ended up removing that one, and I actually really liked that we removed it. So I'm tempted to remove this one, but I'm kind of waiting because, like once you remove it, you can't put it back, basically. So I've been going back and forth. The original plans, Michael Glassman's design plans, by the way, look at my lime tree. Oh my God. I don't know if it's in shock from being pruned by the arborist, but man, I think it's dead. I think I'm going to plant another lime tree in the fall. But anyway, I'm going to extend this pathway and it's going to come out around here. You can kind of see where it goes around here. And then it's going to come this way. And then the idea was to have it wrap around the weeping willow. I don't know if there's going to be enough room over here to have it wrap around the weeping willow, maybe like kind of tight. But the original plan was to remove the raised bed. But again, I'm not totally sure. I've been talking to Michael Glassman about it and kind of going back and forth. But I think what needs to happen first is I need to remove all of the plants that I have in this raised bed so I can get a good look at it, have a blank slate, and really decide. Now, I planted all of these bearded iris earlier on when we moved in here. So it was probably the first fall that I moved in here. And they really didn't bloom the first year at all. But then the second year, they bloomed pretty well. But as we all know, bearded iris, unless they're re-blooming varieties, they really only bloom for a couple weeks in the spring. And then that's pretty much it. And that's where these guys have been. Other than the spring when they bloomed, they really haven't done much. It's been pretty much foliage, and now this time of year the foliage is starting to brown out. Not to say they're not beautiful, because they are beautiful. I think the problem is that I mass planted them, and I think that was a mistake that I made, because this is kind of a prominent area. Like as soon as you come in the gate, this is the first thing you see. And when you see a mass planting of bearded iris that's not blooming, it's not that impressive. I think a better option for bearded iris is like what I did over here. I just planted, I think this is only 1 or 2 rhizomes over here, but I just sporadically planted it in with a bunch of other stuff so that when it was blooming, it looked absolutely gorgeous. But when it hasn't been blooming, it hasn't really been a big deal because there's all this other stuff to look at. So I think what I want to do today is I want to transplant my bearded iris, which this time of year is the perfect time of year to transplant bearded iris, anywhere from July to September. At least in zone 9, that's when you want to transplant bearded iris because it's still warm and then the rhizomes can settle into their new home before it gets too cold. Bearded iris needs to be divided every 2 to 3 years anyway because the clumps get really crowded and the blooms, they bloom less and less the more crowded they get. So it's good to divide them anyway. I used to divide them at my last house, and after I divided them, they blew up and were absolutely gorgeous. So I probably could leave these bearded iris in because they've only been in for 2 years. I probably could leave them in for 1 more year, but because I kind of want to see this raised bed as a blank slate, I figure why not go ahead, do it this year, and then I can sporadically plant them all throughout the garden so that I can still enjoy the bearded iris, but not in a mass planting that's really noticeable when they're not in bloom. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do before transplanting my rhizomes is I'm going to cut back all of this foliage. And just like any rhizome or corm or bulb, you don't want to cut back the foliage too soon in the season because this is the way that the plant gets the energy for next year. It gets the energy from the leaves, from the sun through photosynthesis, and then it stores it in the bulb or the rhizome. In this case, it's a rhizome. So you want to make sure that you don't cut it back right after it finishes blooming. You actually want to start seeing it start to brown out a little bit. So these guys, they're ready to be cut back, and it's actually good to cut them back when you are transplanting them because you don't want all the energy to go towards the foliage. You want it to go towards the roots so that it can root into its new home. So you can do this after you pull them out. I'm just going to do this now so I can kind of see what I'm doing because I have a ton of foliage on these. So now that they're all cut back, I'm going to use a garden fork to carefully get them out. They aren't very deep. They're planted pretty shallowly, so if you can just get the fork underneath them, they should pop out pretty easy, just like that. And then I'm going to try and leave most of the soil in here because I'm going to have to rinse off most of the soil anyway when I divide them. Okay, so there's my clump that I got to divide. There's probably 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 or 9 pieces in here that I could divide if I wanted to. So now I'm just going to grab my hose and rinse off as much as I can. Rinse off as much of the soil. And then you'll start seeing the rhizomes poke through. I don't know why they remind me of shrimp, but I just think of them as little shrimp plants. Okay, now for dividing, you don't need any tools other than your hands, and you're just going to start breaking them apart. And your goal is just to kind of carefully break them apart so you don't break the rhizome. If you do, don't worry about it. It's not that big of a deal. Sometimes they'll just fall apart, but if they're really, really been crowded for a long time, sometimes they can kind of grow around each other, and it makes them a little bit harder to divide. And you can see the foliage kind of pops up as like a little fan, and that's where you can kind of know where each rhizome is. I'm just going to leave that one. And the other thing you're looking for when you're dividing your bearded iris is you want to make sure that the rhizomes are nice and firm. If they're mushy, they probably have some sort of rot or disease. So just discard the mushy ones. But these all look good. Now, obviously, I do not need this many bearded iris. This is a ton of bearded iris, in addition to all the rest that I have. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the nice, biggest rhizomes that look the best. Like this one looks fantastic. And this is one that I will replant. Whereas like this one, while it will probably grow into a plant with this tiny little rhizome, it's just kind of not worth it. So I'm going to discard it. You can give it to a friend or something like that. This one looks good. This one looks good. Get rid of that one. and this one. So when I replant these in the next area, I'm going to replant them in a circle. And so what you want to do is you want to have the rhizomes pointing inwards and then the foliage on the outside. So you're going to kind of go like that. And you want to plant them very shallow so that the back of the rhizomes are actually touching the sun. They do say that if you live in a really, really hot place, you can put a little bit of soil on top as a little bit of sun protection. But I live in a super hot area, and I've always found that just leaving them open to the sun is probably the best. So this is how I would replant this grouping. Just like that, and it'll bloom really well for next year. So I've got one clump down. I have about 30 or 40 more clumps to go. We'll see how far I get today. I'm not expecting to finish. I think I am also going to take out this lavender. It's overgrown. It's starting to get woody in the middle. It was here when we moved in. I just don't really love it, and I don't want to keep a plant in my garden that I don't really love. So I think I'm going to pull that out while I'm working on it, and then just slowly work my way down this raised bed so I can actually start getting a fresh look at it and then deciding what I'm going to do. So I made some progress, not as much as I wanted to, but definitely some progress. So you can see I got this whole end cleared out. Looks really good. That's what I wanted. I ended up taking out the lavender, and that ended up being the hardest job. I am a total mess right now from taking those out, but I'm really, really glad I did. They needed to come out. They were totally root bound. You can see the roots are like circling around each other. They just needed to come out. I should have taken them out a while ago, but you know, it's lavender. I love lavender. And then you can see under here, I have all my bearded iris that I cleaned up, I divided, I cut back, and these guys are ready to be planted out. Then coming over this way, you can see I took out 3. There was 1, 2, 3 of the lavender right there. And then I just have this bearded iris left, and I started cutting back this bearded iris right here and digging up some of the rhizomes. And then it just is getting a little hot, so I decided I just really have to start transplanting the rhizomes, get them in the ground and get them watered in so that they don't dry out too much. So that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to take a break with this mess, and I'm going to go head over to the meadow and start planting a couple of the rhizomes. So over here in the meadow, I think right on the edge of the meadow is going to be a perfect place to plant these rhizomes. These are the purple and white ones. Really, really pretty, and I think they'll be beautiful. And I think even when they're not in bloom and it's just foliage, it's going to be really nice at the edge of this meadow. So you can see that I set them up in kind of a circle, and then the rhizomes are going to be pointing inwards with the foliage foliage outside. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to dig a hole for the roots to go in and then make a little mound where the rhizome can sit on top of. So this part is still above the level of the soil and it touches the sun, but then all the roots are covered. So let me show you. See what I mean by shrimp? Doesn't that remind you of a little shrimp? Okay, so I'm just gonna get my hole dug. And then all I'm gonna do is put a little mound in the middle. Put a little starter fertilizer in. And then you just take the bearded iris and you just set it on top of that mound. And so the roots are under, you can cut these if you want. The roots are underneath, but the rhizome's on top. Just like that. Okay, last one. Okay. Totally weird way to plant a plant, I know, but this is how they like to grow. This is how they like to live. These will root in very, very quickly and then they'll start dividing. Hopefully they'll bloom next year. Might be another year after that, but I think that they'll be really, really beautiful. So I have about 1 billion more of these to plant around my garden. I'm not going to put in too many because, like I said, I don't want a bunch of foliage during the summer that's not blooming, but I do want some for the spring. So I will start transplanting some of them, but a lot of them I'll probably give away to friends and kind of cull them a little bit. But it's always fun to have bearded iris. It's always fun to have plants that propagate themselves really, really easily, and bearded iris are definitely one of those. So I wish I finished more of cleaning out that raised bed, but I kind of knew it was going to be a couple-day project anyway, so that's okay. I will work on that at a later date. I hope you all enjoyed this, and I hope you all have a chance to get in your garden today.